Poor boy marries billionaire's blind daughter, and her surgery reveals everything. That's what the world said. They called him a gold digger. They said she'd regret it. But he didn't care. For 3 years, he showed her a world she couldn't see. Every sunrise, every laugh, he was her eyes. Then one morning, the doctor said the words he feared most. Her vision can be restored. He smiled outside, but inside his heart broke, because when she opens her eyes, she'll finally see the truth. Life's biggest lessons hide in stories, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Ethan Miller worked long hours in a small auto shop on the edge of Los Angeles. Oil-stained hands, secondhand shoes, and a dream too small for the world to notice. One night he saw a luxury car broken down near the highway. Inside was Grace Raymond, a soft voice, trembling hands, and eyes that didn't move. She was blind. He helped her out of the car, fixed the engine, and walked her to a cab. No small talk, no flirting, just quiet kindness. But she came back the next day, and the day after that. She'd sit on an old stool in his garage listening to him work, laughing when he cursed at rusty bolts. He'd read her signs from the wall just to make her laugh. Then came her father, Charles Raymond, the billionaire developer. He stormed into the garage, looked around in disgust. "You fix cars. You don't belong near her." Ethan didn't flinch. "Maybe not, but I treat her like she's human. That's more than you do." That night, Grace told her father she was going to marry Ethan. He called it madness. She called it love. They got married in a small church under golden light. No press, no cameras, just two people who believed love didn't need approval. The world laughed, but Ethan didn't care. Because when she held his hand, he knew, even without sight, she saw him better than anyone ever had. The first few months after the wedding were simple and beautiful. Grace couldn't see, but she could feel everything. The warmth in Ethan's touch, the sound of his laughter, the safety in his silence. He turned their small apartment into her world. He painted the walls bright so she could feel color through warmth. He labeled everything, forks, shelves, even the sugar jar, just so she'd never feel helpless. Every morning he'd describe the sunrise from their balcony. Right now, he'd say, "The sky's gold turning pink. The city looks like it's breathing light." Grace would smile and whisper, "Then I'm lucky, because I get to imagine it." Money was tight. Some days dinner was just toast and instant soup, but Grace never complained. She'd sit beside him while he worked on his old laptop and say, "Ethan, if love paid bills, we'd be billionaires." He'd laugh and kiss her forehead. "Then I guess I'm the richest man alive." Still, late at night when she slept, Ethan would stare at her and whisper, "I wish you could see what I see, because you'd finally know how beautiful you are." But in his heart, he feared one thing. The moment she could see the world, she might realize he never belonged in it. One evening, the call finally came. It was from the hospital. A new clinical trial could restore Grace's sight. Ethan froze. Grace cried before the doctor even finished talking. She hugged Ethan tight, whispering, "I'll finally see you." He smiled back. But deep down, his heart twisted. He wanted her to see the world. But what if the first thing she saw was how poor their world really was? Her father, Charles Raymond, arrived the next morning. He hadn't spoken to Grace since the wedding. Now standing in their small apartment, he looked disgusted. "This place smells like oil," he muttered. Grace reached out and held his hand. "Dad, I'm getting the surgery." He frowned. "And who's paying for it, him?" Ethan looked him straight in the eye. "No, sir. I'll take another job." "I'll pay for it," Charles laughed. "You? You can't even afford a dinner in my house." Ethan didn't reply. He just held Grace's hand tighter. The father sighed. "Fine, I'll cover the cost. But when she gets her sight back, she'll finally see what kind of man you are," Grace whispered. "That's what I'm counting on." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window staring at the city lights, knowing that tomorrow could change everything. For her, it was a miracle. For him, it felt like goodbye. The day before the surgery felt like the longest day of Ethan's life. Grace was excited, talking about colors, sunsets, and what she'd wear when she could finally see. But Ethan couldn't smile back for long. Every laugh felt like a countdown. He tried to hide his fear behind small talk. "What's the first thing you'll look at?" he asked. She smiled. "You." That one word hit him harder than anything ever had. That night they sat on the couch holding hands, saying nothing. The TV flickered, the clock ticked, but all Ethan could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat. He wanted to tell her he was scared that when she saw the truth she might not love him anymore. But he didn't. He just whispered, "I'll be waiting outside." The next morning the hospital smelled like bleach and hope. Grace squeezed his hand before the nurses wheeled her away. "Promise me you'll be the first person I see," she said softly. He forced a smile. Always. As the doors closed, Ethan stayed standing there, eyes wet, heart numb. For everyone else it was a new beginning. For him, it felt like the end of the only life he'd ever known. The surgery took 5 hours. Ethan didn't move. He just sat outside, staring at the operating light like it could tell him what was happening inside. Then the doctor came out, smiling. "She's awake," he said. Ethan's legs felt weak. He walked into the room, his hands shaking. Grace sat up slowly, bandages still covering her eyes. She turned toward his voice. "Ethan!" "I'm here," he whispered. The doctor nodded and started removing the gauze. Grace gasped as the light hit her eyes for the first time in years. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I can see," she whispered. Her voice trembled like a child's first word. Ethan smiled, tears falling freely. But before she could reach for him, her father stepped in. Charles stood there with flowers, pretending to be emotional. "My baby. I'm so proud of you." Grace looked around, blinking, confused. She saw her father clearly. But when she looked for Ethan, he wasn't there. He'd quietly stepped out of the room. For the first time in her life, Grace could see everything. Except the man who made her world beautiful. Grace came home 2 days later, with perfect vision and an empty heart. The moment she opened the apartment door, the silence hit her. No smell of coffee. No sound of his old radio. No Ethan. She looked around and saw his jacket still hanging by the door, the half-fixed toaster on the counter, and a single note on the table. It said, "Now you can see the world the way you deserve to." Her eyes filled with tears. She touched the ring he'd left beside the note, the same one she'd placed on his finger 3 years ago. She searched everywhere. His shop, the park they used to walk in, even his old garage. He was gone. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. That night she sat on their bed holding his photo under a lamp. "I can see now," she whispered, "but I'd give anything to go back to when I couldn't, because then you were here." She broke down quietly, her tears falling over the picture. And somewhere across the city, Ethan stared at the same moon, whispering, "If she's smiling, that's enough." They were both under the same sky, but no longer in the same world. Weeks passed. Grace stopped going out. She had her sight but nothing left to see. Then one morning her father came over with a small brown envelope. He looked different, quieter. "I found this at my office," he said, placing it on the table. "It's from Ethan." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a single photograph. It was her, sitting in the garage years ago, smiling while Ethan worked. On the back he'd written, "You couldn't see it then, but you were my whole world." The letter said, "Grace, if you're reading this, I'm far away, not because I stopped loving you, but because I don't want your new world to feel small because of me. You deserve light, not the shadow of a man who was only ever good at fixing things. Thank you for letting me be your eyes." Even for a while. Grace broke down, pressing the letter to her chest. Her father stood frozen, realizing he'd misjudged the only man who ever truly loved his daughter. He whispered, "I was wrong." She looked up, eyes full of tears. "I know," she said softly, "but now, it's too late." For the first time, Charles Raymond, the man who thought money could buy anything, understood what his wealth could never afford: his daughter's happiness. Weeks turned into months. Grace never stopped waiting, not for him to return, but for the day her heart would stop expecting him at every sunrise. She started volunteering at a center for the blind, the same way Ethan once helped her see without eyes. Every time she guided someone through a hallway, she'd smile softly and whisper to herself, "This is what he would have wanted." One evening, she climbed to the rooftop of their old apartment. The city glowed beneath a sky painted gold and pink. She held Ethan's photo in one hand, his ring in the other. "I can see everything now," she said quietly. "But what I miss most is the one person who made me feel alive even in the dark. She placed the photo and ring beside a white flower on the edge of the rooftop wall. As the wind blew, the flower swayed, catching the last light of the sunset, just like her smile, because sight had given her the world. But love had given her meaning.